So welcome to this deep dive sessions. The titles is IFIs financing at the scale and the scope needed to support countries most in need transition to high-performing food system. It's a long title, but we discussed a lot about this food system transformation during this forum. But one of the fundamental thing here for our IFIs, and of course for the government and private sectors, is how we can monitor, track the financing to food system transformation. That's kind of fundamental data gap we have now, although everyone talking about food system transformation. So this session we co-organize with IFAD and World Bank. Those are leading this the work on the financing flow to food system called 3FS. And this 3FS offers harmonized methodologies that enable government development partner stakeholders to track the level and distributions of financing flow to food systems. So this session will provide a platform to discuss this first-time data on financing flow from international financing institutions to food system. And this is opportunity for evidence-based discussion on IFI financing to food system. So we have 3 questions in this session. What is the level of financing of IFI to food systems? To which area the food system is IFI financing going? And is IFI financing aligned with priorities for food system transformation? So we have excellent speakers and panel. We have keynote speaker from Stefanos Voitou, Director of UN Food System Coordination Hub, joining us online. We have a presentation from the 3FS teams, Nadine from IFAD and Chris from World Bank. Chris is online. We have panel discussion of James Kato from the US Treasury, Qingfan Zhang from ADB, and Shenggen Fang from the China Agricultural University and CGI members. And we have Joe Pri for closing later on. So with that, I would like to introduce our keynote speaker, Stefanos, online. I think, are you there?
Good morning, yes.
Good morning.
You can hear me?
So Stefanos is the director of the UN Food System Coordination Hub, which was established the result of 2021 Food System Summit. Now I'd like to introduce Stefanos to make a keynote speech. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, and good morning to everybody from Rome. So I would like to take this 5 minutes for the keynote to do 3 things. So one is to give you a small history of why the hub has been established and what we try to do. The second is actually to focus on how important the finance is for the agenda of the food systems transformation. And the third, and that will be a bit of the introduction to what later Nadine and Chris will present, what we have done so far and what we would like to do in the agenda of finance. So as you know, the hub was established as a follow-up to the UN Food System Summit of 2021. And the hub has a main objective and very core focus, which is to coordinate the UN system, but also what we call the ecosystem of support, which includes additional international organizations, the IFIs, research, academia, in order to support the countries to implement their food system pathways. There are 137 countries today that they have such pathways, a lot of countries in the Asia and the Pacific region. And these pathways in many countries, we have seen lately by a survey we have done, that in 2/3 of the countries, these pathways, they are now part of the official development plans and official development documents of the governments. So we put together the different assets of the UN system, and as I said, of the ecosystem of support. There are some of the groups of the ecosystem of support that they are quite important for us, and we work with them. One such group is, of course, the stakeholders, because we do know that we cannot achieve food system transformations without having in the table groups like youth, the private sector, indigenous people, women, and farmers. And we have established a stakeholder group that it's looking on how the different views of the stakeholders could be reflected in the implementation plans for the pathways. The second extremely important group is the science. And I'm very pleased to see that sg-afnr is part of this panel you have today, because we have created a scientific advisory committee for the hub, and sg-afnr is a member and actually one of the co-chairs of this scientific advisory committee. And we are looking to see how we can adapt the science to the needs of the national food system focal points, which we call them the national food system conveners. And here I will put the first link, if you want, with the finance. One of the things that we listen a lot from the national conveners is that they have been really immersed now into this idea of the food systems approach. They do understand that it is a different thing to talk about agriculture and a different thing to talk about food systems, and they understand the value of the food systems approach. But they are asking actually, what is the practical way to make this food systems approach work at the country level? And one of the most important questions is how they can adjust their financing structures to serve such an approach. And when we talk about finance structures, we talk about everything from national budgets to the private sector contribution to the international community contributions via different tools and different mechanisms to the countries. So it has been identified by almost, I think, 75% of the food system national conveners that we work with. And these are around 156 people from equivalent number of countries. 75% of them has identified finance and financial structures as the most important element to achieve food system transformations. So we try in the hub to support them with this work, as I said, with the stakeholders, with the science group, and of course, with our work program, which includes focus in 4 specific thematic areas, if you want. One of them being finance and investments. The other 3 being, as I say, the science, technology, and innovation, the partnerships, and of course the policy and governance. So we want to bring together these 4 areas, which you understand there are different areas that acceleration can happen, and support the conveners. When it comes to the finance, and I go to my second part here, what the conveners are asking are 3 things. One is to put the numbers behind the reality. So indeed, what you said, what the moderator said in the opening, to understand how much money actually are allocated for food systems transformations. And that's a very difficult exercise. And I know that Nadim and Chris later will explain what they have done with the 3FS model. And it's a difficult exercise because, first of all, we don't have a universal definition of what is a food system and how we define the food systems. The World Bank has very nice created this new food system finance architecture in the UN Food System Summit. And this is a guiding principle right now. But we need to understand that for different countries, there are different definitions of what is a food system. The second thing that the conveners are asking after the numbers is how they can access multiple instruments of finance for the food systems. And here the big challenge is that when it comes to the financing, we know that the biggest part actually, the part of the finance that will make the big difference will come from the private sector. Because as much money we can have from international donors or from grants or from some programs, if the private sector will not be motivated, then we will not be able to actually achieve the increase of financing flows for food system transformations. And on this, I think that we have at least 3 different levels that we need to see. So it's first of all, the corporations and the companies that they are in the food systems value chain, and to see how they invest their money. The second is the financing, the private financing institutions that actually they give the money to these corporations to invest. And we want to see what is the level of allocation of funds from these private finance institutions. And of course, the international finance institutions is the third extremely important level, and I think you are covering this here. The third thing that the conveners are asking about finance is to help them with the allocation that's happening at the national level and the combination of financial flows with the national budgeting. And on this, I will give you an example of what a convener told me once about the link of financing flows and the budgeting. So a convener that was sitting as a Director General in the Ministry of Agriculture once told me that every year he receives from his minister a set of key performance indicators and a specific budget to do his work. And the key performance indicators, they include mostly agricultural related indicators like increase of productivity, increase of exports of a commodity, and as I say, a certain budget. So the convener told me that if he wants, for example, to introduce in these key performance indicators dimensions that they are related to the food systems approach, like a health dimension, an environment dimension, and social protection dimension. So the first thing that will happen is that other ministries will be asking the Ministry of Agriculture to provide the funding or part of the funding to focus on these key performance indicators. So we need really to link the financial flows, the budgeting, to key performance indicators that have to do with the transformation of the food systems. We do have, if you want, we have a starting point, of course, which is the indicators of the Sustainable Development Goals, and many of them are related to food systems. But really, this link of finance and indicators should happen. And for me, one of the things that we really need to see is at some point a level of accountability from financing institutions on making sure that the financing flows are contribution to the indicators. So let me come to the third and last point of my opening here, which is what we try to do in the hub. So one of the most important things is mentioned that it's asked by the conveners to support the creation of knowledge and evidence to make them happen. For the first part, which is the data, the information, the figures, the financial flows, Nadine and Chris later will give you an exact amount on how this is happening and what is the results we have so far. On the second, on the access, we are working right now with different funds like the Joint SDG Fund, and we try to establish some food systems financing windows there. With the SDG Trust Fund, which is, a central UN fund, we have managed to establish a window, and the first allocation of $15 million is already available for a total of 12 to 15 countries all over the world. And on the last one, we do have a stream of work that we will try together, of course, with the colleagues from IFA and the World Bank, but also with the Scientific Advisory Committee of the Hub to understand how we can link the indicators of success to the finance flows. So we have a very big next milestone in 2025, where we'll have the second stock-taking moment. I can't give you a specific date right now, but I think it's going to be by mid-year of 2025. And we would like to go in this stock-taking moment by creating some evidence that these 3 areas work has started to be done, to go there with specific numbers and figures. From the first indications of the work that we have seen that the level of financing is very inadequate to address the food system transformation needs. But we do hope that with the continuous engagement with you and with the additional actors from the ecosystem of support, we will be able to present something better in the next stock-taking moment. So thank you very much for your time. and all the best for the panel. If you don't mind, at some point I will switch off my camera. It's quite early here in Rome, and I will need to start preparing some other things. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Stefanos, and setting a very good context for today's discussion. So now I would like to invite Nadine Gubosta, Director of Food System Coordinations, and also Christopher Brett, Lead Agriculture Business Specialist, World Bank, online, to discuss the trend of IFI financial flow to food system. The floor is yours.
Thank you and good morning. Thank you for being with us today. I believe Chris should be online and we should also have a presentation online. So my task today is going to be to present to you what the situation of international financial institution to food system is. I will share with you the kind of data and work that IFAD and the World Bank, working with the hub, you saw Stefanos online, in support of the hub, have been doing to try to put, as he mentioned, some figures and some data on international financing to food systems. I have my boss in the room here, Jo, and I think at the opening session she shared with you some data on global financing to food systems. What I mean by global is that it was not only limited to the IFI, it included the bilateral, the multilateral, the philanthropies, and another caveat I want to put on what she shared with you is that she only focused on concessional financing. Okay, so please do not compare the data we presented there with the data I'm presenting today, because we are not only focusing on concessional financing, because you know as IFI, you do more than that, you do concessional and non-concessional, and here we are not talking about all the multilateral and bilateral actors. We will be discussing with you only the international financial institution, because as explained, they are being asked to play a key role in financing food system transformation. So with this introduction, let me start. You have online my colleague Chris Brett, agri-business specialist at the World Bank, who is basically co-leading this agenda with IFAD. So let me go back. What I want to present to you is the work we have been doing over the past year in order to come up with a methodology to track financial flows to food system and be able really to put a figure on what is happening in terms of financing. There's a call for more resources, but we need to understand what is the situation of resources today. And so we call this tool the 3FS, because as you can see here, it's tracking financial flows to food systems. So you see 3F and 1S, and we thought that will be an easy and nice acronym for you to remember when we talk about financial flows to food system, the 3FS. Joint work between IFAD and the World Bank in support of the hub, and I will tell you in a few minutes who helped us to do that. In terms of context, you are all familiar with the food systems that we can call failures today. The food systems are about the production, processing, distribution, preparation, consumption of food, and its socio-economic and environmental outcomes. So that's what the food system was looking at. And put very simply, the issue we are looking at is that today the food systems have been extremely performing in the past, but today they are faced with a triple challenge. The number one is that you would expect that food system provide food for all, but we know that food system fail to provide food security and nutrition for all today. I won't give you the figures, you know them by heart. The second challenge we are facing in terms of food system is environmental sustainability. Again, I won't take you through the data, but just a starting example is that if today the way the food systems operate, we produce, process, distribute, prepare, consume the food, is not achieved, is not transformed, the climate agreements cannot be achieved because, as you know, food systems are responsible. Just one example of 1/3 of the green gas emission. A lot of discussion on the industry sector, the transport sector, but until recently at COP28, food system was not in the debate about basically the climate changes, or not sufficiently included. So environmental sustainability of the food system is a key issue. And the third one is the issue of livelihoods. I mean, the people who feed the world, the farmers, the agri-food workers, just the agri-food worker, 2/3 of the poor are the agri-food workers. Also, the majority of the small farmers, who represent about 70% of the farmers in the world, live in poverty. So there's also an agenda that we cannot continue to have food system where those at the heart of it live in poverty. And this is a triple challenge we are facing today: food security and nutrition for all, environmental sustainability, and decent livelihood for those who are at the heart of the food systems. This this is the reason why the UN Secretary General called the Food System Summit. Digging into the financing, the global tax price for food system transformation is assessed at about 300 to 400 billion a year to have to transition to high-performing systems. Please consider that this is a global figure, because food system transformation is not a southern agenda. It's not only about hunger, as you know. It's about transforming the way food systems operate. A big part of this spending is an issue of the global north, the way the food is produced, the way the food is transported, the way the food is consumed, the kind of energy we use. So it's a price to be paid by the global north and the global south in making food systems more efficient. So also what it means in terms of food systems, because yesterday I was asked, does it mean that we retire food security and we speak only about food systems? And we always explain that food security is part of the food system agenda. So the big priority is that food security and nutrition for all, but today we can say it's not enough. Is that the way to feed the world in a nutritious way must be sustainable and must not continue to harm the people and the planet, because the cost of climate change, just to give an example, is just too high to pay. The third element is that the food system has to be resilient to shock and crisis. We see the example of the Ukraine war, where the supply chains have become a big priority for all the countries. And finally, the fourth element is that the food system must provide decent livelihoods to those who work and operate the food system. So food security is at the heart of it, is the priority, but in ensuring sustainability, resilience, and decent livelihood. So basically, how do the countries, as Stefano was mentioning, finance this food system transformation and their own cost? The SDG agenda says basically countries have, the least developed countries or the countries most in need have to manage three sources of financing to finance the food system transformation. The number one is the effort on domestic resource mobilization. Domestic resource mobilization, even in the low-income country, most often is the biggest source of development of financing. So we cannot underestimate it. The second element is that we know that in these countries it's not enough. It needs to be complemented by international development financing and hopefully concessional development financing in the fiscal and debt distress context, what we know. And finally, about 50% is expected to come from the private sector financing. So to put it simply, three sources of financing have to be managed in a complementary manner for those countries. I'm focusing on the countries from the global south because the expectation is that the countries of the global north manage themselves. So our task is to focus on those countries most in need and challenged to finance their food system transformation. Another element which brings us to the heart of what we are discussing today is that, again, the UN Food System Summit and the Secretary General of the United Nations called on the IFIs. On the IFIs to basically steer a massive increase in concessional financing to food system, again, in the fiscal and debt constraint context in which we operate, to help countries most in need finance a transformation, the transformation of their food system. The second thing that is asked from us as IFI is to come with standardized methodologies and tools. Basically, what is the issue is that the countries are saying we need an analytical tool. We need to be able to cost how much do we need for food system transformation. And we also need, and my boss is there, she was telling me, okay, Nadine, there's $350 billion call for food system transformation, but how much do we have today? Can anybody answer on that question? Because it's not enough to say this is what we need, but where are we in meeting this target? And then as IFI and as IFAD and the World Bank were designated to lead on the financing agenda on food system transformation, we say we know that to make the right financing decision, you need data, you need evidence, you need that information. And basically, the challenge we face today is that there's no data, there's no evidence on how much is going into food system, to which country, to what areas, and how effective is the targeting of the financing. So our objective working together, and I'm just looking here at the evidence and the data, is to provide countries and the global development community with data and analysis on financial flows to food system. How are we doing? And the key value is that, as Stefano was saying, there's no harmonized definition, there's no harmonized methodology. So can we propose a methodology and principles that can be agreed by the different parties that provide simple information on financial data? You know, decision makers don't want to look at Excel tables, so we need to make it simple and accessible. And finally, for a country, can they compare over the years and how they are progressing, and also for the IFI and the development community. So this is what we aim to achieve by developing the 3FS, tracking financial flows to food systems. We didn't do this alone. We worked with GAIN on nutrition issue. They were an early supporter. Of course, on FAO, on with FAO and on definition and methodology. The Inter-American Organization on Agriculture was a big help. AGRA, that you know, OECD was essential for the data on IFI and international institution. Let me not take you through it, but it will not be doing justice to say that we did it alone. We built on existing instrument and methodology from these institutions, and many of them gave us also human time and resource to do that. So to say we didn't do that alone, we basically came up with how do we look at financing to food system, what do we measure, and the consensus with what we call the strategic advisory group is that we should look at 5 types of expenditures when it comes to food systems. What goes to agricultural development and value chain, what goes into infrastructure for food systems. The number 3 is the expenditures related to nutrition and health. Number 4, social assistance, food assistance, emergency assistance. How is the support provided to the most vulnerable groups to access food and nutrition? And finally, the investment towards climate change and natural resources. So this was a mapping of the different buckets, if I can say, that we will look at when it comes to financing food system transformation. From there, the question is, how do we measure? And I can assure you that it's much more complex than that, but let me stop here in terms of the methodology we took. But then the next step is basically, how are we financing? And we did this work for the countries to be able to measure their financing and the international development community, which is the bilateral, the multilateral, the philanthropies, working closely with OECD and the database where all these different partners are reporting. But here, for the purpose of the session today, we are taking a deep dive on what the international financial institutions are contributing to when it comes to food system transformation. We chose to focus on the international financial institutions, which are part of the IFI Action Plan for Food Security, which is led by the Asian Development Bank and US Treasury, to say, okay, these are the ones involved. We have the Asian Development Bank, the African Development Bank, the Inter-American Development Bank, the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development in terms of regional organization. At the multilateral level, we are looking at the World Bank Group and the International Fund for Agricultural Development. We have added 2 institutions which are not IFIs, which are global funds, because these are critical actors, global fund, in terms of financing for food system transformation. So this is why we call, for the moment, this group the IFI plus 2 global funds. And with this introduction, I'm going to give the floor to Chris, my colleague from the World Bank, to tell you what does the data looks like for this international financial institution, plus what are they doing in terms of financing for food system transformation. Chris, over to you.
Yeah, no, thank you very much, Nadine. I mean, you've really set the scene very powerfully there, and the audience can see that there's a tremendous amount of issues around this very important topic of food systems transformation. Just to sort of highlight, from the World Bank side, we regard this tool as very important for us because it looks at numbers across government, across all the different institutions. And we're obviously looking at IFIs plus, as Nadine has laid out. So it links very strongly to our repurposing agenda, where we're advising governments very carefully on how they're linking finance to policy. So it's very important, you know, to take that concept on board. And just as we're starting this presentation, I want to highlight, you know, for me, one of the most powerful words in this whole scenario is transformation. And I think we should be really challenging ourselves globally, not just with IFIs, but with governments and with the private sector. You know, are we really transforming food systems, or are we just really treading water, keeping it into the same issues where we've got concerns about the nutrition, the food security, we've got issues around the environmental, livelihoods, etc., as Nadine laid out. So looking at the IFIs plus, you know, coming into this slide, we're looking at numbers from 2018 to 2021. We've done numbers across countries, we've done numbers across, you know, the international global ODA scene, but, you know, drilling into this IFIs plus, you could see the kind of finance that has gone from 20 billion in 2018 to 27.6 billion in 2021, with a considerable spike in 2020. Now, this spike is obviously due to COVID, when there was a lot of finance released into the system, quite rightly so, to help and support governments over that crisis. And then, of course, it's starting to stabilize. So what we're trying to show here very clearly, we're not doing that well, you know, as IFIs. I mean, obviously including the World Bank where I sit and others, you know, in the room there, and other IFIs as well, where you can see we've gone from 28 billion to 27.6 billion between 2018 to 2021. OECD numbers, as been said, but obviously we're looking at updating this very shortly as new numbers come along from OECD. So moving into here, you know, really wanted to talk about these 5 pillars. Nadine has laid them out, and the whole point of the 3FS is to compare apples to apples at a country level, global level, where we're looking at this agricultural development of value chains, social assistance, infrastructure for food systems, this is rural infrastructure, climate change and natural resources, and then nutrition and health. When you look at it here from the international IFIs, we can say 34% is quite a credible amount going into developing the value chains. Agricultural productivity is key, inputs, etc., research development. But when we look at this, what worries us, you know, at the World Bank and in other scenarios, the discussion is the amount of money that goes into social assistance. Social assistance is really servicing emergency needs, urgent needs. It's not investing in the future. You know, we are international financial institutions. We are not investing long-term transformation when so much finance goes into social assistance. Of course, the social assistance is vital, but this is something we have to look at, because back to this word transformation, are we seriously transforming when so much money goes into servicing immediate need, not medium to longer term requirements? This is a very important area to consider, and that's something we should debate a little bit further here. And of course, we can see coming up there is the climate change finance as well. So moving on, I mean, what's really important here is looking at what IFIs are targeting in terms of income groups. Quite rightly, you know, you can see the numbers here, 43%. Is going into low middle incomes, and you can see, of course, the upper middle incomes and the LDCs as well. So when you look at it, you can see finance is quite well targeted, but there's still 27% going into UMICs, and that's also something to debate about as well. And you can see the numbers, very, very interesting. You know, when you look at LMICs from over the years, you look at UMICs and you look at LDCs, you can see the numbers there, you know, varying, but there's a little bit of consistency there and balance across LDC's financing over the years. Not a lot of growth when you look at 7.2, 8.6, 8.8, and then 7.4. So that's an area of concern to organisations like the World Bank and where we're targeting. And just to say at this stage that at the moment the World Bank is mandating in agriculture and global food practice, where I sit, to put 60% of our lending, our finance, into Africa, and also 25% into fragile conflict violent states. So those are strong directives and targets for us. But here, I think this one is also very interesting. where you can look at the IFIs. You know, they've got an approach here of South Sahara, Africa, 27%. Then South Central Asia, 25%. Far East, 15%. So you can see the balance there. I don't need to go through the numbers in detail here, but you can see that 27% focused on Africa is still, we would consider, quite low based on the need. And of course, the need is very high. Next slide, please, Nadine. Okay, thanks very much. So we're coming towards the end of my session of the presentation, but I wanted to share here with you, you know, the important areas where we're sort of drilling down and looking at finance. And you can see here from the World Bank is supplying 50% of the international development finance. So obviously a significant number, but also very credible. Asian Development Bank is offering 16% into this very, very important area. You can see how this goes from the World Bank down to the GEF. I mean, the Global Environment Facility is, as we felt, very important to capture on the FIIs plus and the GCF as well. It's not just about the IFAs per se, but it's about these funds which are really evolving. GEF is on a very, very strong financing of the food systems going forward through GEF 7 FOLAW, which I manage with the World Bank, GEF 8, which is managed by IFAD and FAO, which is coming online, and also GEF 9 is now starting to be planned. And they're all very, very strong financial approaches to the food system. So we're seeing GEF really scaling up, you know, particularly the environmental aspects of the food system. So I will conclude there and hand back to Nadine. I'm very happy to take any questions and say that, you know, the World Bank, you know, we want to move this 3FS, you know, from where we've been working at developing the model, piloting the model in Niger, in countries like Niger, Peru, and Kenya, which has just been completed. Very specific country level case studies which will be shared. That we also want to say that we want to turn this into a very long-term program, working collectively with partners so that we can build out this model and run it every year in many, many countries. So over to you, Nadine. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chris. And I will just have a few words to close on this presentation to see that the importance of having data and evidence on financing for food system transformation. It raises issues on, are we progressing on the level of financing? We can see that over the past 4 years, we have stayed at the same level. Are we financing emergency or are we financing transformation? Are we targeting middle-income countries or countries most in need? And the last questions we are looking at, because this is the focus on IFI, are we providing concessional financing or are we providing non-concessional financing? So you can see that when this data comes, this evidence, it triggers all kind of discussion on what are the investment, what is the distribution, what is the targeting, are we financing the right thing? And I can tell you that this is just a snapshot of the data we have, and our aim is to dig into that, to understand better that what is happening, to have evidence-based decision on investment based on the reality on the ground. Of course, it's not only about the data, it's about the financing windows and instruments we put in place for this to become a reality that the countries are always also asking. So it's quite a vast agenda, ambitious one, but I hope with that you have the starting point for an interesting conversation today. Thank you.
Thank you, Nadine, and Chris for the fascinating presentation. There's so many dimensions we can explore from this database, and then not only IFI financing, you know, this scope to increase this, you know, domestic financing, private financing. That's even more dimension to explore in the future. So let me invite panelists to the stage. Shengen and Qingfan, please proceed to the stage. And we also have online James Cato, the Director of International Development Policy of U.S. Department of Treasury. Jim, are you there?
Yes,
Okay.
I'm here. I hope you can hear me well.
Yes, I can hear you well. Okay, so yeah, sorry for late night participation on your side. So maybe I'll start from Jim. You know, you are the very much the driving force of this IFI action plan. And also this, we have co-organized this IFI forum on food system transformation in last February in Stanford. And also we have a lot of discussion about MDB reform and more coordinations on this topic. So Jim, so can you briefly explain on this your expectation on this IFI cooperation through this IFI forum of food system transformation, and how this is important for IFI to track and then
yes, no, certainly, and thank you very much for the invitation to join the panel, and particularly for this session, because I must say this is as the representative.
Sorry, connection seems to be bad on his side. No, his side, I think. Yeah. Okay, maybe I keep the Jim later on. So I move on to Jingfan. Oh, Jim. Okay, maybe I move to Jingfan. So you saw the presentation and.
Results that are coming out of the work they're doing really does inspire and directs us in all kinds of interesting directions and conversations. So for those who perhaps maybe didn't benefit from the session yesterday where I spoke about the forum, very briefly, the IFI Global Forum was a partnership between the Asian Development Bank and Stanford's Doerr School of Sustainability that was organized in February of this year. And it was an effort, inspired by the success of the IFI action plan to address food insecurity that the institutions developed in 2022 to respond to the food security crisis. And that was really instrumental, in our view, in orienting the collective response of the IFI system and contributing to the success of the institutions and really scaling and surging their response to that devastating crisis. And we saw certainly as a shareholder in all of these institutions that values the work that they do. We saw both an opportunity, but also a responsibility to support the collaboration and to support the cohesion that we saw that was spurred by the IFI action plan, and in support of our goals, our shared goals to accelerate progress on food systems transformation. I'd really anchor our expectations or aspirations, if you would, for the forum in our broader goals that we're pursuing both through MDB evolution, the broader effort that started at the World Bank, but is now we're engaging on across the MDBs to improve, to support reforms, to support the efforts that they're making, so that the MDBs as a system is more agile, swifter, more responsive to the needs of developing economies. So we really saw that that's a macro level goal, if you will, that we have across the IFI system. And so for us, the Global Forum is really the vehicle through which we support that broader objective, but targeted very specifically on the critically important priority of food systems transformation. And really, this has been a priority for the United States and for this administration, and for Secretary Yellen, the Secretary of the Treasury, for her personally, since she's taken office. And so what we hope to achieve with the IFI Forum is to continue that collaboration and cohesion, to continue for it to be a space where the IFIs can come together to discuss amongst themselves and with us as the shareholder, but also with other important stakeholders like UN agencies, like the private sector, civil society, academia, how the collective response can be enhanced, how we can make faster progress, recognizing that we must accelerate progress if we are to have hopes to achieve the SDG goals, but also to be a space where we can discuss emerging topics, or where we can delve deeply into specific areas where collaboration, greater collaboration can really return dividends. So an example, a key thread in the conversation was certainly the criticality of partnerships, but also it was the importance, for example, of the climate-food-nexus. And so I think Nadine touched on that well. That the IFIs need to collaborate more with each other, with governments, with other partners, to accelerate investment in food systems to deliver greater food security, but also to strengthen resilience so that food systems can be in a better position to withstand future shocks. So I'll stop there, but this is really an effort that we're very enthusiastic about. We really value the partnership with the Asian Development Bank here, but also with IFAD, the World Bank, and others, and really are really excited about the potential for this forum to be a vehicle for supporting useful work this year and in the future.
Thank you very much, Jim, for this high expectation on these IFI forums and cooperation. So let me turn to Jingfan. Based on Jim's intervention, what would be your expectation? What would be your idea to move ahead this agenda of tracking financing food system transformation? How ADB can collaborate with other organizations?
Thank you so much, Shingo. Again, I probably can also I started with what James and I present yesterday in the IFI forum takeaway. Again, I take this opportunity also. I thank U.S. Treasury leadership, and we work together with other IFIs, had a very successful IFI forum in Stanford in February. Again, I tracking food security, food system transformation in the IFI operations being also included as a part of a session in IFI forum in February already. So again, from the IFA and also World Bank presentation, we can see those 5 components. Basically, those 5 components we will say one of the components also included in the our IFI forum also. So yesterday I also mentioned about the nutrition security, probably still some one element is lag behind. We need to strengthen. We need to not only just talking about our investment, but also in terms of the data collection and also the alignment is still quite challenging. Otherwise, I think this IFI forum itself and also the currently the 3F system very much aligned. Again, World Bank R&D specialists yesterday we also discussed about talking about the 6 pathway. Actually, these 5 components very much aligned. I have the 3 key points I want to share here. Number 1 is we need to localize causes of the FI. Structure-wise, this is quite different. In the World Bank side, of course, really we're talking about the global challenging program. Food security, nutrition security is one of them. But at the same time, we also have many of the challenges. And then they have the different platform. For example, they have the water security, they have the biodiversity conservation, they have the pandemic, and many others. So one of them also associated with the food system transformation. For future, along with the data inputs is quite challenging, and I think we need to continue to discuss. Again, as I discussed yesterday, when the ADB will introduce this new operating model, we established the agricultural, food, nature, and rural development sector office. I must say, for some reason, our structure quite aligned with your 5 components. We have 2 regional teams, but we have the member of the practice team. We have the dedicated director to lead. For example, agribusiness, we have the 1 director to lead. We have a natural capital climate, 1 director dedicated to lead. And of course, we are work together with the health education for nutrition security working group. We also have very much dedicated infrastructure for food system. We call it the integrated river basin and coastal resilience working group. What they call is the community of the parties for food system. So again, very much, already cover one of them. So I think when James say it's takeaway and also forward, we need to have the working group for the each of the session, which we discussed in the Stanford. ADB happy, very much winning. Also work with IFI and also World Bank. I think we can host this dual working group on the tracking, financing, the food system transformation. As I discussed yesterday afternoon, ADB, World Bank, IFI, we can co-host 1 working group on the tracking, financing, the food system transformation. Take the advantage. We have the law as $14 billion food security program. Take advantage. We are right now working on our new target for the food system transformation. This is a first point I want to mention. Second point, I need to mention about also lessons learned on $14 billion investment. Again, Nadia, you just mentioned about you say the major investment come from the domestic IFIs and also the private sector. You also highlight importance of the private sector investment. You say the 50%. Actually, it's quite big. Now, when talking about our $14 billion investment, yes, I share 3 takeaways. Number 1, I also recognize, I also agree, private sector play very important role when we prepare our responses to the food crisis in 2022, and also the $14 billion, 25% is come from the private sector, and also a number of the dimension quite essential. Provide the working capital to the SME, IFIs to support the local bank, and also particularly the trade supply financing. Addresses the disruptions. One of them very, very critical. But when I'm talking about the private sector engagement, it's very much still part of the FI investment. I know you're talking about the private sector is outside of FI envelope. I understand that, but again, this is some linkage. This is one, in terms of the private sector investment, I think FIs also have the obligation to engage our private sector window to enable the market. For that reason, with this new operating model, we have the new department called the marketplace innovation department, try to access to the market. This is one point I want to highlight. When we're talking about the private sector account for the 50%, how we really define and how I also find out the law from the FIs to create the enabling environment. That is quite important. Number 2, again, one dimension we didn't include in this, your 5 component is, but yesterday I mentioned about this sort of policy reform, or is related to also the budget support. Again, a largest picture is the repurposed agricultural subsidy. So the one of the three related, how you're going to refine this framework, and that's something we can further discuss. Again, last year, IDB approved the $500 million in the Philippines on a rice subsector reform. Basically, try to stabilize rice market in Philippines. The challenge is still there, even though we have the $500 million investment, but you say they still, the rice prices still went up there 40%. And the situation is still quite intense. Now is a change of the policy is quite essential in Asia Pacific. I think in many of the countries as well. And then they also related how we repurpose agricultural subsidy, change the regulatory framework, change the policy, repurpose government support to nature-based infrastructure, and also productively enhance the infrastructure and so on and so forth, research and the development. This area, how we're going to tracking their inputs. Another thing is also related short-term responses on budget support. The ADB expenses last year, or 2022 particularly, we are introducing a countercyclical financing support. We call it the CSF. Very quickly, because the IFI always will rely on the project cycle. With the crisis, emergency responses, we need to have the new tool. So that's why we create this new CSF, quickly provide close $2 billion to 5 countries, particularly in Central Asia. Now, when we track how much, one of this sort of the $2 billion is allocated to the food system, that moment we are going to detail this $500 million go directly to the food system. Again, the type of the new tool we will need to sit down together, discuss about. Course is the IFIs, what are the new tool exist. Lastly, in our session yesterday, Gates Foundation probably also comment one of the slides, sort of, when we're talking about scale of the need for financing, $350 billion. We're talking about the hidden cost, $3 trillion environmental cost, and the $6 trillion health cost. We're talking about this huge demand for the investment. But right now, if you're talking about small farmers, we are working with the small communities. The size of the agricultural food system project in bilateral is quite small. We need to introduce this new way of doing the business. That's why I mentioned about last few years, we adopted the landscape approach to transform the food system. For example, the high quality farming along the Yellow River, 9 provinces involved. We introduced a integrated rural development natural capital investment along the Yangtze River. Now we will invest close to the $3.7 billion. Many of them also associated with this food system transformation. So again, the type of the landscape approach, very essential. How we going to also scale up across the country, not only just East Asia. So that's something we also discussed in the Stanford. Finally, I want to say is COP28. Again, this 3 IFIs came very timely is in the Food System Summit, and then the COP28 came after. But I think it's a message is quite aligned, right? It's very much also aligned with the theme of this forum. This is a forum we very much focus on climate-food-nexus. It's very much addresses the kind of triple crisis in Asia Pacific. Of course, this crisis also exists across the world. So again, I want to say, take it forward. use this momentum of the IFI forum in Stanford and also associate with the COP28, and then IDB very much ready, work together with IFI and the World Bank, of course, with the guidance of the US Treasury, we can take the agenda forward. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Qingfang. Thank you very much. So now to Schengen, I think you have seen the figure, this distribution of IFI support. It's very much a lot of financing going to short-term support, but we have only 2% to nutrition, for example. How do you see this, how we can balance this, addressing these immediate needs to the food security, but more, channeling financing towards more long-term sustainable resilient food system, and that's also applied to domestic repurposing, public expenditure agenda. So how can this kind of exercise can be useful also for policy reform in domestic?
Well, thank you, Shingo. I'm so happy that IFIs finally begin to embrace the food systems approach. I know the 2011 Food System Summit was a very good beginning, and the setup of the Food System Transformation Hub led by Stefanos is a way to really make sure that all the summit sort of results, outcome, or sort of commitments will have to be implemented. Now, I'm the only one that is not working for IFIs here. I'm an independent professor, a researcher. I want to challenge you a little bit. In the past, we always try to relabel our investment to something new, for example, nutrition-driven agriculture, nutrition-driven development. That was very popular maybe 5 to 10 years ago. But many development agencies, even many government agencies, simply just relabel all the investment to nutrition-driven. So we really see a very increased investment in nutrition. But when you look at this investment, they really don't improve nutrition. So this time is different. So I wanted to challenge you, make sure that all this investment will be able to transform our food systems, not just relabeling. So that's why you need indicators. You need third party to track, monitor your progress. It's not just I say, you say. It's an independent third party. Now, Shingo, your question, long-term, short-term. So yes, in short-term, people need food. They need shelter. Definitely, they need support. But long-term, yes, we need to make sure that these people will be able to graduate from the short-term support. There are some good cases. So for example, in Ethiopia, this so-called productive safety net. So it is a safety net. It is a social protection. But make sure that the people who receive social protection can also develop their capacity to grow out of poverty, hunger. So for example, social protection from the government, from the World Bank, from USAID, from many other, from WFP in Ethiopia. So during the drought, all this sort of short-term support was given to smallholder farmers. But make sure that there's a condition. The smallholder farmers have to build their, let's say, irrigation facility, have to work together to build the roads. And then there was a strong evidence to show that return to that sort of investment is very high. Productivity, smallholders' income, even nutrition improvement of children. So productive safety net. Then coming back to North America, Mexico. Mexico introduced a program called Progresa, conditional cash transfer. Again, in short term, poor households need support. Otherwise, children will be hungry. Again, the condition is parents have to send their children to health clinics to make sure that children are well fed, health checked regularly, So again, the impact of progressive program is huge in terms of helping children to be out of, let's say, malnourishment, in terms of promoting local economic development. So I really hope this sort of short-term relief and a long-term development can be combined. And there are enough practices. Here in Asia, I think we're obviously here, we very much focus on infrastructure, overall economic growth. Social protection came late. I wish it could have come earlier. So social protection is not just a waste of money. It helps to drive the demand. But if this money is used wisely, it can also help to improve growth, particularly poor growth. So I really hope ADB or other financial institutions in Asia to combine the short-term relief and the long-term development together. Now, I very much agree with Qin Fan and others. The private sector plays a huge role. Now, my question to you is, how can you use your money smartly to really leverage the private sector to invest in food systems transformation? Again, it's not just rubber stamping, or it's not just relabeling. You need independent researchers or institutions to monitor, track that. And equally important is how you're going to use your lending or support to guide the local governments, well, and the central governments, to invest more in food systems. And here, invest more in food systems, it's not just amount, and also right priorities. I mean, you have already discussed about the subsidies versus investment, short-term relief versus long-term development. So all this can be guided through your, I think, to be frank, it's a limited investment, around the total investment required. IFIs investment is still very limited. But how you're going to use limited support to really guide, to help to navigate the whole food system transformation. Indeed, it's really critical, very important. I will stop here.
Okay. Thank you very much, Xingang, for your guidance, our work, future work. Any reaction, Nadine or Chris? Okay. So I think we have some time. So if you can have any question from the floor, please step forward.
My name's Alex. I'm an economist. I've been in investment banking and project finance, but now I'm more focused on the venture capital and innovation space. My question is, while there is a role for IFIs in big ticket projects such as hydro dams, irrigation systems, do you see IFIs taking a more active role in the venture capital and innovation ecosystem? Because these are the experts. When you talk about food systems, these are the ones who have access to the ground and who have access to projects that can provide funding. And I think the innovation and venture capital ecosystem in Asia is just about to explode. So do you see a role of IFIs in the venture capital innovation ecosystem?
Thank you very much. Any other question from the floor? Anyone want to react to this private sector? Yeah.
Yeah, very quickly answer your question. Actually, yesterday we have the one dedicated session here focused on scale up venture capital investment. I can get together. Actually, one of our key speakers came from the Parole, Minister Steve Victor. He is also taking charge of agricultural, food, and the environment. Environment is one of his mandate. We have a good discussion. Actually, we also review what happened for the last 30 years. 1992, we have the two global international conventions. One is climate change, one is biodiversity conservation. But after the 30 years, we can see significant progress taking place for the climate change. But if you review progress, on a international convention on biodiversity or the ecosystem protection and so on and so forth, very marginal, very small. And also more extreme to look at what happened for the 2010, COP 2010 in Japan for the International Convention on the Biodiversity. One of the target saying that COP, 12 years after, no one were achieved. I think the reason is because we review the process, we saw is number one, still associated with the measurement, accounting, how you measure the progress of the ecosystem. Without the sort of the, we say the credible measurement, quite hard for venture capital investment, and also many of the other partners engage. So that's why in the 2010, when we work on the payment for ecological services and also eco-compensation scheme along the Yangtze River, we introduced the Gauss ecosystem product as a sort of the tool measure the ecological progress as a sort of the entry point. Say we need to pay for performance. Again, this is a sort of the one of a starting point, but we still need to look this type of measurement can adopt in the local situation, particularly associated with this landscape, and also involve the small farmers and also the communities. Again, a sort of the measure ADB introduced, particularly after the new operating model. As I share with Nandia, we established one dedicated team, have the one director and the 10 staff focused on natural capital and environment, climate. And also we create the natural capital lab together with the Stanford University, and we try to also scale up investment in natural capital. Again, we also see some positive progress. I must say, particularly awareness raising after the pandemic. Global community understand the importance of the biodiversity and ecosystem. And of course, it's a COP15 on the biodiversity taking place first in Kunming, after in Montreal. We agreed to prepare this 2030 biodiversity framework, and also agree the 30 by 30 target, and also agree build up this global biodiversity framework fund. We aim for this sort of $2 billion same fund, trying to create this new fund. They also suggest create one specific window for FI. Again, John, you know that you work in this space quite a long time. In the past, the global environmental facility, their money very much earmarked to non-FI organizations. But in that way, they don't have a chance to leverage the sizable investment. You just think about UNDP and others, they use as sort of the grant is at one time. But FI, if we use this money from GF, we're going to leverage the bigger size of the investment. So lessons learned for this future biodiversity fund is they're going to earmark and it's 25% or 30% for FI. That is one of the measures. And also with this sort of the planned financing, I think we have an opportunity, of course, together with the natural capital lab and also enhance natural capital accounting methods, we have the opportunity scale up our investment in this space, but still far away from what we needed. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jing-Fan. I think we would like to move to the closing remark, but Chris has hands. If you have anything, quick reaction.
I'll be very, 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 very quick. Just to turn around two things. I think that's a really interesting question and comment that came from the floor. Number one, the World Bank obviously looks very closely at innovation, and there's quite a lot of examples where we've been sort of investing in venture capitalists and new innovation ideas. For example, Hello Tractor in West Africa. But also, importantly, this is one of the areas that the IFC, you know, the private sector arm of the World Bank Group, really does look at investments in venture capital. But I'll stop there, just to say that there was those quick points, and I appreciate the time is passing. Back to you, Cheng-On. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chris, for your complimenting comments. So now I'd like to invite Jopri, Associate Vice President, Strategy and Knowledge Department of IFAD, to make her closing remark. Please. Okay.
Can I make my...
I'm sorry, we had...
I cannot reach the microphone. Anyway. We'll change back so that we can... Okay. I'm Daphne Rojas. I'm with the Asian Women's Network on Gender and Development. And we are affiliated with the United Nations Women Major Group. My question is, what is the landscape in terms of access of women in the IFIs food systems? One, because in many countries we lack the capital support. And then the second question is, what is the role of IFIs in natural capital and the role of women in preserving this natural capital? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Anyone quickly? Okay, maybe Joe. Joe can take.
Sorry. Can I wait for the answer, or no, I sit there already?
Thank you. Actually, I love the discussion. And I don't think I'm going to try and do justice to all of the comments that came forward, but perhaps just reflecting on a couple of things. But first, I want to thank Shingo, James, Christopher, Nadine, Shengen, and of course, Ching-Feng. Thank you very much for a very, very fascinating discussion and for fantastic moderation. A couple of things that came out that I think are still, I mean, this is a huge task, right? I'm a big fan of the measure sort of ambition that we've got to set for ourselves as international institutions, because that's one of the key things that really makes us far more credible than perhaps what the average is that we are seeing out there in the market. And also to demonstrate that this is the standard, essentially, that we've got to set for all of the actors in any space of development that we are all responding to. But then deep diving into the 3FS tool, I think the 3FS tool is really demonstrating both the opportunity that we have, but also the challenge that we have. The opportunity that, yes, we can look at financial flows that are domestic, that are international, that are, and within ODA, what is concessional, what is non-concessional, concessional, which is ODA, and non-concessional within international financing, and then what is philanthropic. But the next step is clearly also trying to understand what are private sector flows, and whether this is foreign direct investment, whether this is other sources. We've got to try and understand that. Because unless we have that sorted, we're going to go with our numbers and think about financing needs with ranges as large as, oh, it takes about $33 billion to fund the SDG 2. Yeah, we've got that. But food systems, it's at $350 billion. And then there are ranges that go between them, right? So, and then once you start to look at this at the country level, the ranges and the standard errors essentially of those measures become even greater. So that's on financing flows, but then we've got to also understand what are financing needs. So just for 3FS, I mean, I think one case is quite demonstrative. I know that the 3FS tool still needs quite a bit of work, but one case, and this is being done in Niger, Peru, and Kenya, and results in Kenya are just coming out. But in Niger, for example, 3FS tool, even during the 2019-2021 space, basically showed, and Remember that Niger is a least developed country. It is extremely indebted as well. But during that time, domestic financing for food system went up by 70%. 70%, 70. At the same time, though, the level of undernourishment during the same period went from 11% to 20%. So clearly, we are seeing that, yes, financing is important. And I loved what Schengen said also about, cash transfers. And I think about cash transfers a lot. But clearly, I think what we've got to do is to also go to the next mile and really try and understand what is going down to the last mile. What are we translating from these investments into essentially our consumption behaviors, and how's that getting reflected in nutrition? And nutrition is the end game. I mean, health is the end game. So we've got to really start to try and see as to how this translates on the ground. And so while this is a huge amount of work that is being done with respect to understanding concessional financing, non-concessional financing, what IFIs and development banks need to do with respect to not just their own financing, but also how they leverage from the climate funds, from the environmental funds, but also from other sources, and as well as from philanthropies. The key challenge for us will stay as to how we translate this into outcomes in nutrition. One last point before I close. IFAD's own experience in this space has been quite interesting. So we look at our results. So of course we look at our financing, and you've seen our numbers now. We look at our financing. But what we've realized is that just having targets on nutrition-sensitive investments, so we have nutrition-sensitive investments that are tagged at design. But how this translates into what is nutrition on the ground varies very much in terms of indicators. So you have minimum dietary diversity for women, and I'll come to that. We have household dietary diversity scores, and we have food insecurity experience scores. Where we did not do very well, but these are, remember, for investments that did not have nutrition as a target. So nutrition takes a very long time to really illustrate itself in the overall dietary diversity scores, etc. And we know that it takes about 8 to 10 years for it to start to show, at least just in the consumption basket. And then in nutrition, in anthropometric measures, it takes another generation, if not more. So what we realized is that even in investments that we are not planning with respect to nutrition, we found that, nutrition doesn't automatically reflect itself. Dietary diversity doesn't automatically reflect itself in the indicators that we are looking at. But then when we started to look at women and how this was gender disaggregated, we found that even there, women's empowerment, women's assets, they don't transform or change very quickly either. So a big pathway for us to change nutrition outcomes on the ground is to target women. We don't know how much of this actually goes to women. That'll be another challenge for the 3FS tool, but definitely is a challenge for IFAD. We are looking at it by setting indicators for ourselves in terms of how many of our investments should be gender sensitive, 100%, how many should be gender transformative, and we've got targets on those. But translating these into nutrition indicators will still require a lot more work. In terms of HDDS, we have very modest scores, but in terms of insecurity, and this goes to the point that was made by the panel as well, this challenge between short-term emergency investments and longer-term or medium-term resilience investments, what we find is that we are able to deal with insecurity, immediate insecurity experience. We are able to improve that quite quickly. But dietary diversity and consumption behavior takes a much longer time to change. So this is an insufficient response, despite what the panel decided for me, to the question on gender. But just to say that, yes, having gender disaggregated data, knowing what is the minimum dietary diversity and how much women are able to show that, as well as showing insecurity as a consequence of our investments, is clearly the last mile. I think what the 3FS tool is doing is really making us understand in a far better way as to what are the financing flows. But the other side of this will be knowing what the needs are for us to bring about the transformation that we require, and then to try and see how much of that actually translates on the ground into overall nutrition and health scores. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Joe. Thank you. So, thank you.